This is the Everything Weight Loss podcast with Shari Ware, where we talk about everything, all things, anything to do with weight loss, health, and wellness. So today I'm talking to Laura Martin, who, after battling her way through IBS, hypothyroidism, anxiety, hormonal imbalances, and skin issues, found herself in an unhealthy relationship with food and knew there had to be a better solution. She dove into nutrition in order to make peace with her enemy in 2016, but that didn't resolve the IBS issues. So followed up her studies by specialising in gut health. It was a journey of evolution and growth, but since the creation of Healing to Happy in 2017, Laura has gone on to help hundreds of women around the globe heal IBS using methods that focus on the gut-brain connection and metabolic restorations. Can't wait to get into this conversation today, but first of all, let me welcome you to the show. Laura, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and it's taken us a little while to actually get to this interview, so I'm super excited for it. So first of all, let me ask you, where did it all start? Tell us more about that story, because I'm sure that's just the overview of the story, and there's much more to it. So why do you do what you do?
Yeah, so it all started when I was like 10 years old, which started with I had IBS, and then I was diagnosed with depression as well at that time. And my whole life was chasing those things separately. Although we didn't touch on my IBS really or any of my gut troubles until I was in my late 20s, because that's when, you're like, okay, something's up here. I got to actually pay attention to it. But from the early age of 10, I was basically told my body is broken and this is just the way it is for the rest of your life. And so I had a really disordered relationship with what my body was supposed to do, how I was supposed to nourish it, how it was supposed to move. I was an athlete, so like my nutrition wasn't that great. Like it's not like how it is now in the school days with kids, but like it was eat whatever you want because you're running around and playing 3 sports. Like it was really messed up, and I developed an eating disorder at a very young age. And then I went on to college to study psychology because it was one of those things I was like, well, if this is my brain, I'm gonna learn about it. I'm gonna make peace with an enemy in some type of way. And they never really talked about nutrition. They never talked about anything. It was just like, here's some talk therapy. Here's how you go through it. Here's just kind of the step-by-step there. And then my mom unexpectedly passed when I was 22, my last semester of university.
Wow.
And so instead of dealing with that, I packed my bags and I left. I left to Asia. And I went there in hopes of finding myself. But the problem about that is if you're broken, you just attract broken things. And no matter where you are, you're going to catch up to yourself. And so I took my trauma of what that was out of my body. So I would starve my body. I would over exercise, even though it was like 47 degrees Celsius, like so hot outside, like should not be outside, like and running and doing exercises outside, just really kind of went that route. And it wasn't until I found myself in a very abusive relationship, a very rock bottom moment, sitting there being like, what the actual heck am I doing with my life? Like, what am I doing right now? And in those moments, you have really 2 choices. You continue what you're doing, knowing what you're doing is wrong and there's no good outcome there. Or you sit there and you take radical responsibility for your life. You sit there and it's like, you have to kind of sit in your vulnerable moment of like, I didn't choose this. I'm not at fault, but I am responsible for how I've perpetuated the lineage of this in my lifetime and my response to these things and all that kind of stuff. So I remember I was sitting there with one of my friends in a cafe and I was like, what do I do next? Like, I'm aware of this, but like, I don't know. I can't tell my family. I can't go home. Like, what am I going to do? And she's like, well, you don't really like you really like food, like in a really unhealthy way, you really like food. And that's what led me to this studying nutrition. And that's when I started to get into it. And that's when I dove into my gut health and IBS and was like, wow, there's a lot to clean up here. Like, I don't even know where to start. And just kind of went down that rabbit hole. And everything I saw was about eliminations and diets and restrictions. And I was recovering from an eating disorder. And it's like, I am aware enough to not do that. Like, I'm not gonna, I did it for a long time. I became obsessed with health and like realized now when I look at it, I'm like, that was just another blanket statement for an eating disorder, like all the food rules. And then finally got to this whole moment of sitting in my naturopath's office being like, what is wrong with me? Like, why I'm eating perfectly, like, what is wrong with me? And she was like, do you want to talk about how your depression is linked to your IBS? And I was like, what do you mean? And then this whole journey began, and it's just this like surrendering that has to happen to finally listen to what your body actually needs. And so now using that as a way to help women around the world do the same thing.
Yeah. This is one thing that I have so often with the people that I work with as well, is that they do all the right things. Well, they're not 100% perfect. Nobody is ever 100% perfect. But on the whole, they're doing the right things, and yet they still have these issues. And it's about understanding that it's actually more than, it's so much more than just food, which is obviously what you've learnt firsthand. So this is one of the favourite questions that I ask people. A lot of people do get a bit stumped with it, but I know that you know what your superpower is. So if I was to ask you what would be your superpower, what would it be?
Yeah, it would be to help women find their way home to themselves. You know, when we are living in pain, whether it be emotional or physical, we aren't the nicest people. We don't know how to show up in our work, our business, our family, our anything. And so I specifically help women that struggle with, you know, IBS or anxiety or, you know, disordered eating patterns, really kind of figure out what it means to be them so they can then explore every option of their life, because they're like, oh, I'm not in pain anymore. Now I get to actually explore, like, what lights me up, what makes me happy, how do I do this with ease without obsessing about getting, you know, my nutrition perfect and all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, like what do I even like? I don't even know.
And that's quite often, that is the case, that people don't even know. And I think a lot of it is because, you know, we've just been brought up a certain way, and we believe that that was the way it was because we didn't know any different. And then it's hard to think, oh, well, hang on. Well, it can be hard to think, oh, there's actually a different way. It doesn't need to be this way. That can be really hard for people. So what would you say would be the things that people do the most that don't serve them?
Oh, fantastic question. So in my world, what I see a lot of people, their bodies start to do funky things. And so it starts with like micro nudges, like how mine started when I was 10, but I ignored it my whole life until I was like, let's throw up on you and figure it out. A lot of women in my world do that. And so they'll start to like eliminate one food. And they'll be like, okay, like I feel good for 2 weeks. Then they eliminate another food because they don't feel so good anymore. And then this cycle happens where they're left with like 5 safe foods. And so they'll come to me, they'll try like low FODMAP diet, elimination diets, they'll try supplements, they'll try all this kind of stuff. Then they come to me and they're like, oh, I have tried literally everything. And I go, okay. And we'll go through the whole process. And they go, I must have to be like more strict. I have to eliminate more. I have to cut out more. I have to do this. And I go, so you want to do the same thing you've been doing for the last decade, hoping for a different result, just with a different name? Because that's at the end of the day what it is. We're not addressing the root issue. We're just, you think we can just out hustle this, or like starve it out or something like that. That's not how it works. It's okay if we remove with a reason, but we have to restore. Why is the body not taking in what it is to begin with, which usually is a nervous system issue. It's stress, it's trauma, it's something in your body is fighting something. But the thing that breaks my heart, and I did it as well, is just like, I am the reason this isn't working. I'm not strong enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not keeping things aligned. And it's like, it's not you. It's the way people have trained you to do this. And we have to be able to reframe that, because we've been raised in such a society where it's dieting and hustling and like there's rules for everything. And it's like, no, like you're not wrong. You're not wrong here. Like, let me just tell you that. But we have to retrain our brain on that.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so what are the steps they need to take? What's the one thing that they can do that's going to give them, I call it the best bang for their buck, get them moving in the right direction the quickest?
Yeah. So the thing people don't want to do is look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly what I'm going to tell people to do. We have to pause for a week or two And we do this in our business, we do this in our work, we do an audit in our like work all the time, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're someone that works for a company. You have to do self audits. That's the thing. You have to be like, how is my work? And you come in, you talk to your boss. You have to do the same thing with yourself. Like, you wake up in the morning, what are you eating? When's your bowel movement? How much water are you drinking? What's your stress like? What is your day-to-day? When do your symptoms arise? I know it sounds annoying and people don't want to, it's like, I've done this several times and it's like, there's something you're missing. And so you have to look at all that, like, what is not just I had a vegetable, but what vegetable was that? How did you feel? You know, what was your thought during that meal and then after that meal? And it sounds like a lot, but you just do that for a week and you are able to come full force to your doctor, to a nutritionist, to anyone you're working with without confusion. Because if you come into like my office and I ask you, like, what did you eat for lunch 2 days ago? And you're like, I have absolutely no idea. I'm like, okay, so where do you want me to start on this? Because I don't know what you're actually doing on the weekend specifically. Like, I don't know what you're doing. And like, how is your body in that? So we really got to start to take radical responsibility for our own lives. And then we start to collaborate with the people that can help us collapse time in our healing.
And I feel like a lot of people, that would be a big step for them. It's different if they're just doing it for their own benefit and they're the only one who is going to look at that, because you're obviously talking about taking a journal. It's important for this stuff to be written down, because otherwise I'm certainly not going to remember what I did 2 days ago. There's too much going on in my life. So a journal of a lot of things, that sounds like a lot of things, which is okay if you're the only one looking at it, but then to think that, okay, somebody else is going to be looking at it. And then with that goes, but then what if they, and it's a subconscious thing, it's not a conscious thing a lot of the time. What if they judge me? What if I'm doing the wrong thing? So then that's a whole nother level. How do you deal with that? And is that a thing? I know it's a thing for me in my past.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing, because my clients are always surprised when they come to me and they tell me like what they did on the weekends. Like, oh my goodness, I had like 5 gin and tonics. And I'm like, that's great. What did you learn? Like, you're supposed to have a health plan that fits your life. That's not the point, you know, because how you get anywhere is how you sustain being there. If you got there hating it, dragging your feet, like starving yourself, that is the only way you're going to be able to sustain that. So it's like you show up and you go, okay, like, I'm not the happiest about that. And then you sit there and you go, okay, so why are, like, be able to sit there and reflect and be like, well, why don't I feel happy about that? And then shouldn't I actually remove that from my life then? Like, if I don't feel so hot about that and like whatever, it's like we have to start taking ownership over our life. And that's the hardest thing. Yes. Like, we keep wanting to outsource and wanting to like, oh, like I'm listening to this podcast or I'm reading this book or I'm doing this. And it's like, okay, but if you're looking at your own life and you're like, okay, that feels a little bit crunchy. And it's like, you don't have to remove it entirely, but how can you up level it so it doesn't feel as bad? So you are okay if someone like me or a doctor or someone saw it, you know, that you sit there and you go, why, more importantly, like, why do I want to fudge the numbers on this? Like, what is that that's making me want to do that? You know,
why do I want to justify it, or why do I feel the need to, or all of those things. One thing I say to my people a lot is, if they're looking at making a change in their life to do with their health, and I tell them to ask themselves 2 questions. First of all, is it something that I can do for the rest of my life? And the second question is, am I going to like doing it for the rest of my life? Because if you hate doing something, that's just as unhealthy.
Exactly. And so that's why it's such a big thing, is to be like, okay, like, and it's going to change. Like, what I liked before, when I was living in Asia, like I used to love going to F45. Like, that was my jam. Now I'm like, like, I want to. And like, I used to love like building these intense plates and like doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, not really we go through different seasons of our lives, and that's okay. But what I tell my clients is, we got to set a standard. It doesn't, and like the standard is like, this is what I don't go below that. And the reason we get disappointed in our life and we get that like shadow sister and the self-sabotaging kind of person chatting to us in our corner in like our background noise is like, because we are going below our standard. But when we uphold our standard, it doesn't matter what season you're at, where you're traveling, what you're doing. It's like, this is where I'm at. And I don't really dip below that. It doesn't matter who I'm with. I'm not like, it's not in an unhealthy, toxic, there's like playroom in there. And it's like, this is where I'm at. It's when we set those unrealistic expectations that we don't sustain it, where it's like, I'm going to drop 80 pounds in 10 days. And it's like, huh? Like, that doesn't even make sense. But like, if you commit to the fact that like health is your evolution and growth, with like, that's your journey of your lifetime, right? Like being healthy is the journey of my lifetime. I'm committed to that.
Yeah.
That means I'm going to be healthy. I'm still going to enjoy it. Like I was just in Mexico. I'm still going to enjoy some like tacos and margaritas, still healthy because I'm still moving my body. I'm not like self-sabotaging and doing those kind of things. But
yeah,
when I wouldn't be able to do that if I was like, this is a cheat meal because it's a holiday and like health isn't it's like, no, like we have to be able to be in this moment of like, here is where I'm at. And this, I do not dip below that because I respect myself enough for that reason.
And it's taking the guilt and shame out of living life. It's about a balance in everything. Actually, Jim Quick said that it's actually about harmony, because not everything is the same ratio in life. So it's really about getting things working harmoniously together, which I actually really love that. It's not about never having those things that light us up. It's just about, are we having it to a level that is actually detrimental to our body? And if so, well, then we need to look at that.
Exactly. Like one of the things is when you get in like honest communication with your body, there's only so many hamburgers you're going to eat until your body's going to want some vegetables.
Yeah.
But if we're not in communication with our body, we can eat hamburgers every day and wonder why we have a massive migraine, like, and like popping all these medications. And we're like, I don't get it. And it's like, do you really not get it? Like, but when we get in this communication, we fear that. We fear because we've been on diets since we were in our early before even teenage years, right? Like we were told this is the box and this is how it looks. And we don't know what it feels like to actually trust our body. So we stick to these diets. And then when we fail, we go, oh, I'm going to just take the week off and then I'm going to try again next week and it's going to be fine. And like next year's my year, I swear to God, next year's my year. And we're always chasing the next 10 pounds, the next IBS, like we're always chasing the next thing. And it's like, that's not the point. The point isn't about getting there and chasing the next thing. It's like, what is the journey and who do you become along that journey? Are you actually learning to trust yourself inside of it? Or is it this someone else tell me what to do because I don't really want to spend the time to learn what my body's doing and I want to live in this fear? And it's like, gotta sit with that.
Talking about fear, I know one of the biggest things that I've come across is, and also in my life, it's something that I've experienced, is FOMO, fear of missing out. The thought that to be healthy means not having fun anymore. How do you address that?
Yeah. So the women because it is IBS and like we don't know what foods cause flare up, it is that thing where it's like, I refuse to eat out. I refuse to go and do things. But at the same time, you're like ordering your food, but like jealous of the burger that your friends are eating next to you. So on a science level, when that happens, it doesn't matter how many nutrients are in your superfood plus salad. If you are stressed out and thinking how much you hate that salad and how much you want to be eating that burger and how much this is going to flare me up and this, that, and the other thing, and you're in your brain, what happens is your blood flow is actually going to your survival organs. So it goes to your brain, it goes to your muscles, it goes to your heart, it goes to your lungs. It does not go to your digestion and it does not go to your hormones, but that's a different story. But so your body isn't even going to assimilate that. And then you leave that table and then you're like, see, I knew something was in that salad. It had to be the garlic sauce. Like I am bloated now. And it's like, no, because you were fantasizing about the burger that you wanted to eat. And then you go home and you like binge on some like healthy nut and trail mix because you weren't actually satisfied with your salad. And it's like this whole perpetual thing. And then we're like, this is why I'm bloated. And it's like, no, because we need to understand how our bodies actually work, like on a minor science level, like how that works and like how we can tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, and then sit there and realize like, okay, if I actually chill out, if I take some digestive enzymes, if that's what I need right now, if I enjoy myself and be like, okay, maybe I don't want like the burger, but I'll get a gluten-free bun, or I'll get like a salad on the side, but I'm still very satisfied with that meal. It's like, you can, once you have that trust with your body, you don't miss out on stuff. You know what you want, you know?
Yeah, and it's about finding a way to satisfy yourself that still fits within the scope of what you're trying to achieve as well.
Exactly. That's the standard, right? Like when you set the standard, it's like, it doesn't go below.
Yeah, there's always a way. It's just being open to looking for the different ways, I guess. And that's something that we need to learn a lot of the time.
Exactly.
So I wanted to, first of all, I'm assuming that you will have some links for me to share on the show. What's coming up for you? Is there anything that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, so not sure when this is coming out, but right now I have a gorgeous class training for 5 weeks. That's called the Labyrinth. And so it's the Labyrinth of Recovery, and it talks all about the science side of things and the soul. So we're talking about the gut brain connection, but also like, how do we reintroduce foods into our life and like make this a like sensual, playful, fun thing about life again that we miss about food. And then at the end of August, I have master classes every single month. So just, it's such an easier way to get to know people. Like instead of like download my freebie and like do things like that, I'm like, just come hang out for 3 days. Like I'll chat about something, whatever it's going to be. The next one coming up is going to be around anxiety and mental health and how we use nutrition to heal that. So that's what's coming in the next 2 months. So
okay, awesome. And I'll put the links to those in the show notes. The last thing I always like to ask people is, if there was one thing, if somebody's listening to this or watching this and they're walking away from it, what's the one thing that you want them to know?
I feel like I say it so much, but it's just always so true. You can't be at war with your body and win. Like we can't shame it. We cannot supplement. We can't make it smaller. We can't do any of that stuff. We have to put down this war and just be like, okay, I'm committed to whatever it is. And like, that's where the magic starts, you know?
Wow. That's awesome. What a wonderful way to end the show. Thank you so much for joining me today, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
It's been a pleasure. And to everybody watching or listening, I'll see you on the next episode. See ya. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Remember to check out the show notes, and if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions, I'd love to hear them. If you've received value from this podcast, make sure to subscribe, and I'd love you to rate and review the show. Have a fabulous day.